Welcome to Talks at Google. My name is Chris Dale. It is my distinct privilege today to welcome the sound engineering and project team behind the release of the new Star Wars Ultimate Collection soundtrack. So what I thought I might do is maybe turn it over to you guys and let each of you kind of introduce yourselves and talk a bit about what your role is or has been on this particular project. So maybe we start with you, Patricia.
I'm Patricia Sullivan. I'm a mastering engineer. I work at Bernie Grundman Mastering in Hollywood. And for this project, I resurrected episodes 2 and 3 for the CD. I did originally master all of 1, 2, and 3, and then episode 1 I remastered for the CD, and then I think those masters got used for the vinyl.
Correct.
So that's where I am with this.
Great. Dan.
My name's Dann Thompson. I'm a recording engineer at Skywalker Sound up in Marin County. And my part in this was finding the original masters for episodes 4, 5, and 6 in the archives. And after finding them, I did the digital transfers that went off to be used to make what's inside there.
Great. Tom?
And I'm Tom Laskey, and I'm part of the product development team at Sony Masterworks. And my part of the project was, speaking loudly, was finding the audio, sourcing the audio for all 6 soundtracks, and being a contact for Pat and Dan, and with a lot of help from Shawn. So he'll tell you about himself.
Terrific. And last and certainly not least, Shawn.
Yes.
Shawn Murphy. Well, I recorded episodes 1, 2, and 3, and had a pretty good idea of what master material existed when Tom called. And I tried to steer him toward, various people who might be able to find these masters. Not an easy task, because, you think, especially episodes 1, 2, and 3, they're so recent, well, this material is going to be easy to come by, and it turns out it's not so easy to come by. And especially high-resolution master material, which of course we would like for LP releases and for future digital releases. So my part, aside from engineering those 3 soundtracks and the one that we just finished, was to sort of try to unearth the master material as much as possible, which I knew about from the previous episodes.
Great, thank you. So the Ultimate Soundtrack Collection comes in 3 different parts. There are 9 vinyl or 11 vinyl LPs. There are 9 CDs that I think also include a special DVD, and there's also the high-def version.
Right.
Tom, maybe talk us through why have 3 different versions, and was there some thinking behind doing vinyl specifically? I mean, vinyl for a lot of people, particularly in the world of tech, seems so old school, but I'm sure there's a lot of value there.
Right. Well, vinyl right now is the fastest growing format in recordings, and everybody wants vinyl. Well, not everybody, but a lot of people want vinyl. So we thought this was a fantastic opportunity to create a really deluxe kind of package, using state-of-the-art, vinyl mastering and that kind of thing, and using high-resolution files. And, a lot of this was driven by the release of the next episode, so the timing was very good for that. Obviously, if you're going to do vinyl, you want to do all formats. The vinyl is actually special because the original vinyl releases of 4, 5, and 6 are different than what is currently available on CD for those episodes. They were done with the limitations of vinyl, timing-wise. You can only fit so much music on one disc, or 2 discs or whatever. So, there were some editing decisions made to accommodate vinyl. So we like the idea of releasing the vinyl exactly as it was released back in the day, putting them all together as one set. That had never been done before. And the CD version that we're coming out with, that's actually a little different than the LP version for 4, 5, and 6. That's the CD versions that have been out since I think it was 92 or something like that, or maybe a little more recently. Those have additional material. So, and the high resolution version, that's another thing. When you talk about tech, everybody wants high resolution. Sure. So we did that based on the LP versions. So, we wanted to offer different formats, to attract as many different listeners as we could.
Sure. Do you guys have any favorites? Did someone got an LP player at home that they love for the vinyl on? Or?
Sean does.
Sean does.
Well, yeah, I've got a lot of records still. Not to get into too lengthy a discussion of when we left off our analog production and went to digital. But, there's a lot to be said for a well-mastered, well-produced analog version, a vinyl version. And, I have a couple of turntables at home and that are nice ones. And I'm sure I'll have a chance to listen to these new issues on those. I play records all the time. Yeah.
So Shawn, you've worked on a ton of movies. You've won Academy Awards, you've won Emmys, Grammys, you've worked on Braveheart, Jurassic Park. The list goes on and on. How does working on this particular project differ from all these other amazing movies that you've worked on in the past?
Well, I think the definition is working on a John Williams project,
right,
number one, and working on Star Wars, number two. And I think that what you have to say about a John Williams project is that, first and foremost, it's all about the music composition and performance. It's, there's very little production compared to what a lot of other composers ask for in terms of a John Williams score. He's a master composer. He orchestrates his own material. He usually conducts his own material, and he gets the performance that he wants in the room at the time. So what our job is to get a great recording of that and to make sure we have all of the nuance, both technically, dramatically, emotionally, that he intends in his music. So the big effort with John is the performance, and we make multiple takes, we edit things together, but we don't do much in the way of production. Many of the mixes you hear are live; they're right off the stage. They're approved by him, and we don't touch them, because that's the balance in the room that he chose. And I think that was true originally with Eric Tomlinson in episodes 4, 5, and 6 as well. I think Eric made live mixes for most of the material, and John got the performances that he wanted, and that's that. That's the end of it. So the difference between a normal soundtrack that we might produce these days and a John Williams track is that basically our approach with John is very much all about the music and the performance and getting the best version of that we can possibly get in the recording world without a lot of production other than editorial production.
In my opinion, John Williams is the definitive composer of our time. I think he's just done phenomenal work. Can you guys talk a little bit more, maybe Patricia, about working with John Williams, what it's like, how precise is he, or any one of you on the panel? I would love to hear some personal anecdotes.
Well, John's great. I think I've worked with him for I said at Reddit 15 years, but I think it's like 20 years. And he's great. You always have to bring your A game. There's, I think Shawn talked about this at Reddit about that that everything needs to be at a certain quality. So you have to do well. And he's a great guy, and he writes really great music. So you can't help to want to bring your A game, or even like an A+ game, like the best that you can have, and even more. You you would bring. So I always enjoy working with him. I look forward to hearing what he's written, and I usually get blown away. And one thing about John, also from the CD world, you know, when the music gets divorced from the film and lives on its own, John's very, very attuned to having it be a really great listen. Like he doesn't want you to get bored. You know, if there's a if there's a dialogue cue that tends to go on, you know, he'll just edit it. You know, he'll be like, oh God, I've heard this again and again, and it goes on too long. We got to cut it. Like he's very attuned to having the listener have a good experience with the music when it's not married to the visual.
Yeah. It's interesting, before I came down here, a friend of mine said to me she had never seen the movies, but she knew the songs, she knew the sound from it. It just shows you how iconic the sound has become. A quick question, I think, for you, Dan. I mean, as a hardcore Star Wars fan, that's why I won the lottery and was able to interview you folks, obviously. I appreciate the passionate fan base that gets, you know, worked up around all sorts of things. I got to imagine there's a pretty fine line you have to walk between the hardcore, sort of authentic, the way it was scored, the way it was produced back in 76, 77 is exactly the way it should always sound, versus, you know, the need to really update the music and the experience for the 21st century. Can you talk a little bit about trying to balance those forces, particularly around such a rabid group of, you know,
You said
fans?
Forces, I didn't.
Yeah.
Well, not being part of the recording process for the scores where Shawn was, a fan myself, I think I guess I've always thought of the scores as one of the characters in the film. Mm-hmm. It stands alone and yet is part. And I think through all the episodes, it's done just fine. So you know, maybe Shawn could answer that a little better than me, but that's my take on it.
Well, here's the thing. You have a group of people who would love to hear all the cues complete, multiple CD versions, not a note left out. And you know, you have to remember, a lot of this music was written for dialogue scenes to accompany action, and it was never meant to be played by itself as a piece of music, but a lot of people enjoy that because it's their hobby, they're a fan, they like that. Understood. I think John, as Pat said, John's attitude in the CD is to look at it in a little more of a normal person, you know, I would say normal person, listen, where the CD plays, you know, it's sequenced through and everything makes more sense musically and doesn't waste time by repeating phrases or having a 30-second held note while we're waiting for dialogue to finish. Having said that, I think there are arguments for both versions. And of course, it's a matter of money. It's a matter of time and money to create a version of these scores that is unfettered. You know, it's uncut and it's complete, and it might represent multiple CDs or a large download at high res, versus you know, the version that the other many thousands of people will like because they don't care about having every note. Which is right, which is wrong? I don't think there's an answer. You know, I can go into you know, gory blow-by-blow descriptions of what exists on these masters because I know, but you know, truth be told, it's hard to develop a complete uncut version because so many of these cues get placed to existing picture quickly after they're recorded. So do full and uncut versions of the cues exist anywhere? Sometimes no. Sometimes the version is cut so quickly that you never have a complete version of the cue that hasn't been placed to picture and been altered in some way.
Interesting. Tom, one of the things that always surprises me, I remember seeing an interview where a lot of the cast in the original Star Wars felt like just really didn't know the kind of movie that they were making. There were a lot of people in the background, a lot of on the production crew were laughing while they were filming, trying to. But when the lights went down and the music started, everybody in the audience, including the cast members who were there at the premiere, realized that they were part of something special. To me, what's fascinating is you have this sort of orchestral symphonic sound, but the context is in the future. What do you think it is about the songs, the sound that makes Star Wars endure as long as it's endured?
Well, I mean, first thing is, it's really great music. I mean, it's really great. What I think, and I think I've read this in interviews with John Williams, that he was going for that kind of old-fashioned serial kind of sound. You know, if you watch Flash Gordon, the TV show, black and white, the theme music is Liszt, Le Prelude. Well, that's a long way from the 25th century. So I think there's a kind of, you know, people respond to that. And a lot of those old serials and stuff, they had that kind of music. And one of the many brilliant things about the music is the way he's taken that kind of feel and sort of made it his own. Because, you know, there's nothing else really that sounds like Star Wars. It draws on all kinds of influences, but the music is unique to him. And it also makes people think of those old kind of serials. And, you know, I don't know if younger people now who don't have experience with that, I don't know if they respond the same way, but I know somebody, you know, of my generation, you know, and I'm already a little young for Flash Gordon, although I saw the reruns, you know, I responded sort of the same way, you know, like, wow, this is great. This is, you know, it's got that familiar feel, but yet it's different and it's new and all at the same time.
Well, we're here. It's a talk at Google, but we're here at YouTube, and I ran into an engineer who works a lot on sort of the sounds of YouTube, and he was mentioning to me that, you know, over half of our traffic is mobile, but the audio quality for mobile is just so low, and so they always have to kind of figure, you know, what kind of audio range, what sort of engineering things do they have to do to make a better user experience? Are there formats? I mean, we talked about digital. Are there formats or listening experiences that some of these younger generations have, their consumption habits that goes into the thinking when you're pulling something like this together?
Well, probably not so much. I mean, I think we're trying to go for the best sound that we can get. And, you know, one of the whole big things with Mastered for iTunes is to, you know, take the high resolution and compress it in ways that still reveal, you know, all of the details and as much of the sound quality as possible, but, you know, make it more portable or whatever. And so it's, you know, it's kind of the best of both worlds. So it's, you know, it's practical for mobile, let's say, but it still has a lot more resolution than, you know, what people were listening, the digital files people were listening to even 10 years ago, you know, the 128K MP3s. So that's really what it's all about, I think. I mean, it's not good sound is good sound no matter what age you're at.
Do you guys ever put virtual instruments on top of any of this stuff, or is it?
Not with John. I mean, yes, sure. Some composers actually compose their scores with that in mind, you know, and they expect you to use samples and other synthesized elements, or they want to do some production which would represent that sort of approach, but not with John. No, I mean, you know, John uses ethnic instruments. Of course, you listen to the Harry Potter scores, some other scores we could note that where there are ethnic instruments involved, but they're played live. They're not sampled, and they're not. It's not to replace something that is live. Now, having said that, on almost every session, Star Wars 1, 2, 3, and 7, there is a synthesizer, and it's there to, you know, either create atmospheres or to create a certain type of sound. I think the celeste in Harry Potter is the best example of that. It's a synth celeste in Harry Potter. For every John episode of that picture. It's just the sound that he preferred because of the music that he wrote, and the ability to play it on a real instrument was so limited that wound up being a better choice. But it's not meant to replace a violin or a trombone or anything like that. It's just it's a specific sound.
Dan, do you have a moment in the production process of this? It was just sort of a bang your head on the wall moment where it was just really difficult. Or it was any scars or trauma that you want to share with the?
I think what was the most difficult was actually finding the elements. The archives is a big place, and some of the earlier episodes, which are the later episodes, just harder to find. As the years go on, and as time went on after the albums were made, I mean, multiple copies of things get made because they go to different. There's a European release, there's an American release, and so there's different masters for things, and so it took a little while to sift through all those elements to find the definitive ones.
From start to finish, how long did this process take producing these?
It actually went once Shawn hooked me up with Dan and Pat, it was pretty quick. It was a couple of months, I think.
Wow.
And I know I can speak to what Dan was just talking about, finding the right masters. I mean, I was in touch with Leslie Ann Jones, and she was giving me sort of the play-by-play of what Dan was finding. And it was like one day I was like, oh no, we're not going to find these. The next day I was like, oh wait, maybe they found them. And Dan said, well, we might have a problem. No, I can fix it. So it was a lot of up and down. And of course, I'm telling all of my colleagues, I'm relaying it to them. And, so it's just magnified exponentially, so it felt like it went on a lot longer than it did, but we're really happy with the result.
So we talked about the 3 different versions. Do you guys feel like anything gets lost when you go from analog to digital? I mean, that's a bit of a Pandora's box to open, but be curious to.
Well, I'll let the pros answer.
Silence.
Well, yeah, the short answer is yes, sure, absolutely. Analog master converted to digital depending on the gear that you use, the sample rate that you choose, and the care with which you do it can be a pretty close replica or not so close at all. And I think the topic of our earliest digital transfers and productions from the late 70s to now is the history of us abandoning the sound of analog recording and jumping into a digital world that was not really ready at that point for us to be in it, to the point now where we actually have very high resolution digital recordings which are excellent, and we can make a conversion which is quite accurate. And I think what Dan did in terms of transferring his analog masters is probably as close as you're going to get to a really high quality 192 multi-bit analog to digital transfer. But is there a difference? Yes. Does it affect the quality of the original material? Yes. Is it perfect? No. But it's better than it used to be.
Okay, I think I have time for one more question, and then maybe I'll open it up to our audience for Q&A. This will be a softball, guys. I'd love to hear what moment, what orchestral moment, whether it's the Imperial Walk, it's the Leia and Han love song. What cinematic moment do you guys sticks in each of the back of your minds that you just could watch time and time again? Can we start with you, Patricia?
Me. Well, I love the Han and Leia theme. Like that to me, when I heard it again recently, it just gripped me. I just love that little piece of music. As far as a visual goes, in Star Wars, in episode 1, when Qui-Gon is fighting the Sith Lord with the double lightsaber, and then Obi-Wan breaks through and does and they do this great little move. I always wait for that move. I wait so I can see that, you know. So then visually, that's like my favorite moment of all 6. Oh, and then of course, in episode 4, when it opens up with like the little ship going by, and you're like, oh my God, and then like the big old ship goes by, it's like, oh my God. Those two, you know, that just blew my little mind at the time. So
That's great.
yeah.
What about you, Dan?
You a fan, Pat?
No, not
No.
No.
You know, for me, it would be the throne room scene. It's so regal, and with the brass, and John is so good at writing for brass. It's uplifting. It gives me chills. That's where I'm at. That's what works for me.
Tom?
Well, I'd have to say it's in episode 6, the big confrontation with Luke and the Emperor, with Darth Vader all wounded, watching on the sidelines. And while all that's going on, you've got the big fight, you know, outside with the Death Star and all the fighter pilots. So it's like back and forth with these. Either one of those elements would be amazing in itself, but you got both juxtaposed. So it's just nonstop. And the music, you know, could have been just like really grating, and you know, but somehow it all works to like maintain to this like amazing climax when Darth Vader finally grabs the Emperor and tosses him down the garbage chute or whatever it was. So, and that gives me chills every time. I'm not a fan.
I think that it's the downbeat. The main title downbeat is the electric moment that for me is, and having recorded it many times, both for the films and in Boston and other places, I can tell you that the musicians anticipate that recording, that piece, more than almost any other.
That's great. All right, well, why don't we open it up to the audience, both here, and I know we have lots of folks live streaming from across the different Google campuses. So.
Do you have a favorite way to listen to music, like a different medium, whether it's digitally now, or do you still like the old vinyls or CD? YouTube.
Cassettes.
8-track.
For me, it's digital, whether it's streaming, depending on where I'm at. But you know, I like to get a hold of high res when I can. But at home, between the two favorite speakers, is my favorite place.
I think my favorite place to listen to music is at work. I really like my speakers. I can hear a lot of detail, and two, it's fun when I get to hear like something that's first generation, something that I haven't touched yet. Then it becomes, you know, it's like kind of cool because there's not a lot of people that can hear that. So I'd say my favorite place to listen is at work.
Yeah, I guess I would be more like Dan. At home is really my favorite, and I have it's a kind of finicky system, and I live in a pre-war building, so the wiring is a little iffy. So some days it's better than others, but man, when I'm having a good stereo day, there's nothing like it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you know, we listen at work all the time, and we have very good monitor speakers that are tuned, and we record most of our original material at high sample rates nowadays, and so it's fun to listen at work. But at home, it's also fun to listen to vinyl and to digital. And more recently, I've started building a system at home where I can listen to these high resolution files when I bring them home, so I can compare what I've done at work to what I've got at home, because the home system is sort of in a way, it's the psychological reference. It's what I listen to a lot, and I know that if it sounded good at work, I bring it home, it sounds good at home, I'm probably in the ballpark, mix-wise, sonically. So unfortunately, I mean, this is a groundbreaker a bit, because there haven't been a lot of great LP releases that I've been able to get a hold of and listen to lately, but I've still got, I'm told, way too many LPs at home that I pull out and listen to all the time. So I have a nice system. It's a Wilson Audio system that I listen to at home. So it's good.
So since you deal with high resolution audio, at what point do you think for human listening is kind of like the top end of like sampling rates and bit rates, like to the point where after that it's just diminishing returns for most listeners?
Yeah, we've had the, there's a camp of people. I don't want to usurp this one, but a lot of people think 96K was the best you can do, and of course, Library of Congress for a long time created that standard 9624 and archived a lot of material in that standard. And we found when we had 192 available, when we made the comparison to 19224, that we could hear the difference, and 19224 was better. And then we, a couple of years ago, we got the ability to record our mixes at 192.32 bit, and so we did the comparison. Every time we do this, we do A/B comparisons that are blind, and we did the comparison again, and guess what? 192.32 was better. And so, I mean, are we talking about a vanishingly small number of people who can tell? Yes. But if I can tell, that's all it takes for me to want to do that. So, should we go higher? I guess the question is, should we be going higher? And my answer is we probably should be at some point as the technology allows. We should probably be doing some A/B tests and comparisons at even higher sample rates to see if we can get it better.
What kind of details started kind of appearing more at that point?
Well, it's always a matter of space. It's a matter of space between the notes. It's a matter of hearing the recording venue. It's a matter of hearing the individual instruments in a placement that they were actually live on the stage. It's a matter of ambient retrieval. It's a matter of accuracy. I mean, obviously, a recording is never a live performance. It's never the same. But you can have a version of it that's pretty satisfying. So it's all those things. It's all those things. And like I say, we don't do this just gratuitously. We try to set up a very good A/B comparison, so we're actually hearing, comparison that's valid and not just something where we say, oh, it's 192, it's got to be better. There's no assumption there. There's no assumption.
I was just wondering, you mentioned taking the masters home and listening to them. I know I've done production of my own, and they sound great on my speakers, and I go listen in my car, my headphones, and I can hardly even recognize it. I've heard stories of mastering engineers like trying mastering even on like TV speakers and different kinds of setups just to see how it sounds. Is that something you guys do at all, or do you just trust your own setup enough that if it sounds good in there, you trust that it'll sound good anywhere?
Well, I tend, at times I'll listen in my car at times because it's crappy in my car. And so to just know what kind of characters are being brought out in my car. And then at times I'll like listen on a crappy computer to see what that sounds like. But I basically listen to what I have at work, because I feel that if I can get a good sound there, then it should translate to other places, and then too I do make my clients do all of that too. I make them listen in their car and listen in a really good space and listen in a crappy space, and just so they can get an idea too of what they're listening to, and that different environments drastically change the sound. And I think that they really need to know that. So.
So one thing I was wondering about was you talked about tracking down the masters in the archive earlier. I was just really curious how they were stored and preserved, the original, or the masters.
The archives building at Skywalker is climate controlled, and there's a section for the audio tapes, and they're lined up by episode. So they were there, although there were multiple copies of things with different dates. And so trying to find the exact ones to use took some time and a little research on when things were recorded, things like that. Jokingly, I think I found one of the reels leaning up against this crate that said Ark of the Covenant on it. But no, it wasn't really there. But it's nice to think of it that way.
Well, the thing you have to remember too is that there are a lot of different masters. I mean, Dan found stereo masters for 4, 5, and 6, which were original LP masters. But there are film masters, and there are various iterations of film masters: original scoring masters, dub units, final print masters on film or now on Pro Tools or whatever the format was. And a lot of those masters are in boxes, not in the vault. They're in the salt mines, or they're stored away someplace where who knows? I mean, we probably have to open a 1,000 cardboard boxes to find all of it. And a lot of that material is our best existing version of these scores. Because especially in the early years, in episodes 4, 5, and 6, we don't have existing multi-track masters of all that material. We do have mix masters, and again, like I say, Eric Tomlinson, like I, did live mixes, so you have a good representation in Eric's mixes of what was there, but those are on mag film, and they were used for dubbing, and they're in a box in a salt mine someplace that Dan never found, and I certainly have never found, and we know they exist, but you know, it's a bit of a train wreck to know what we've got and where it is. You know, it's a good question.
Well, let me just say also part of the issue too is that the ownership of the music has changed hands many times. So you never really know when, you know, company B purchases from company A, are they really getting everything that company A had? And then there's company C and, you know, so it's tough to keep track of that stuff. And that's true of so many projects in recordings, that the real masters and the multi-tracks and all that, they're just scattered all over.
I've noticed in the last several years that more and more orchestras are hosting events where they'll play a film, they'll show a film while playing the soundtrack. And my experience has been that I thought that the orchestral sound would become constantly more prominent throughout the entire showing, but I found that actually there would be times in watching the film that even though the orchestra is playing the whole time, even sometimes quite loudly, it just sort of fit with the film, and sometimes it would pop back out, sort of a Necker cube effect. I wonder if you had any thoughts about this sort of kind of entertainment, and also what your experience is just watching a movie. How does the sound come in and out in your consciousness?
Well, I can give you the short history of it.
Go, Shawn, go.
You know, for years there were versions of musical pictures, you know, Sound of Music, you know, Wizard of Oz around, where they would extract the dialogue and sound effects, and they would play the orchestra live. Sometimes they would do it episodically, sometimes they would play the whole picture. These things have been around for a while. But the modern film with the orchestra playing live was really started in about 2002, when we did a live performance of E.T. at the Shrine Auditorium. That was the 20th anniversary of E.T. And this was John Williams conducting an orchestra end-to-end, nonstop, with all of the music resurrected and placed in the film exactly as it was. And if you know the Shrine Auditorium in Los Angeles, you know it's a large venue, and the orchestra's got to be amplified. And of course the dialogue and effects had to be amplified as well. It was very successful, and what came out of that was this whole movement toward building dialogue and effects tracks with an orchestra playing live. But what you have to understand is it's so venue dependent and so operator dependent that the mix you get is going to be very haphazard. It's not going to be consistent, and it's not going to be necessarily accomplished by persons who really know how it should sound. It's going to be, if it's a concert hall, you might not need to amplify the orchestra at all. If it's a large venue, such as the Shrine, 6,000 seats, it might need a lot of amplification. It could be anywhere in between. And you have to, at some point, assume the competence of the person that's making the balance, which may or may not be high. So I think that what's happened is, you know, we've seen Back to the Future, we've seen Home Alone, they're the ones I think that you're talking about. It runs the gamut of quality between really, really good and really substandard, and I think there's no way of knowing how it's going to be because it is so venue and operator dependent. It's an entertainment. The orchestras find that these things make a lot of money, and so they They are programming these events more and more. And I work for some orchestras that do that. It's a moneymaker for them, and anything that makes money for a classical orchestra, I'm for. Right, exactly. But the quality is an issue, and I think your point is well taken, that it's not consistent.
Thank you guys for being here. So what inspired you early on to get into music as a career, and what keeps you inspired?
Me?
Start with you.
Start with me. Well, I played guitar. I played accordion when I was younger. I was in a band. You know, we played rock and blues for beer. And it was fun, and I really loved it. And, you know, music moves me. And so when I realized that I wasn't such a good player, but I could hear that magic. I could hear it. So I wanted to be close to it. So I was able to find a way by being on the technical side of things. So I could still help a project be born. You know, at times I joke and say that I'm a musical midwife. You know, because I'm like at the end of the chain, and I'm yelling at the client to push to like get the baby out. and so I can be part of that. Like I can help them shape their sound and dot all the I's and cross the T's, and you know help them give their music to the world. So
That's a hard one to follow. I grew up with music in the house, so it was always a soundtrack in the background, and I guess maybe I should think about it more, but it could even have been after seeing Star Wars with such a wonderful score behind it that pulled you into the film, that I started playing music in the background of the things that I did. I had to mow the lawn, and my room was in the front of the house, and I just shoved my speaker in the window, and I'd crank up Rossini. I would play stuff, and it would just blare down the block, but you know, my folks seemed to support it, and I just wanted to be part of music, but I never really wanted to be a performer. It wasn't my bag. So I looked to be part of the chain, and I found a spot, and it's one of the best places to be, to observe these wonderful artisans, as she says, birth their art and be part of that, and to help them along their way as it gets to mastering. It's pretty incredible.
Well, I also grew up in a house with music. My mom was a big classical music fan, so there was always music, and she was also into records too. And she would, you know, she taught me the difference between the different labels, and I grew up with that. And I wasn't very good at sports or anything like that, but somehow music I was much better at, and I learned how to play the oboe, and I actually went off to music school to do that. But earning a living that way is kind of difficult, or it certainly seemed that way for me, so I sort of gravitated naturally to the record business. I worked in a record store when there still were record stores, and you know, just sort of ended up in the music business, and I just love it. I mean, I've always had, you know, I mean, music for me is everything. It's my religion, it's everything, and there's nothing in the world almost that moves me the way music does. So I'm just thrilled to be around it all day, and working on a project like this, you know, I still have vivid memories of going to see the first episode and not really knowing much about it, and then just being totally blown away. And, you know, working with somebody like John Williams, who I discovered from his concert works, not really his, not his soundtrack music, and then, found out later, it's just really a thrill. And, working with all the different details, the packaging details and the graphics and all that, it's just, there's endless creative opportunities. So that's what keeps me going.
Well, it's always about trying to find a job that encompasses things you love to do and things you're good at. And so if you love music and if you love things technical, you travel down a path that diverts you several times, but ultimately you wind up in a job like this. I'm very fortunate to have a job that's technically interesting and musically interesting, and I get to work with great people all the time. So it just wound up being an accumulation of a lot of experience and time. And from having a music background, I was a brass player for a while, but again, never good enough to make a living at it. But an appreciation of music and an appreciation of things technical, and combining that to make a nice time.
That's great. I think we're going to have to wrap up now, but I would be remiss if I did not ask one final question, which is the elephant in the room. Episode 7. Should we be excited?
No, not at all.
Yes. Yes.
Boring,
Yes.
boring.
Yeah.
There's another episode?
Yeah. Well, I've seen it.
Now that's a whole bunch of other follow-up questions. Hold on.
Oh, man.
But out of order.
Oh.
We're out of order.
All right. Well, I'll take that as validation for my ticket purchase 6 months ago or whatever. Okay, so I think right now, one thing we do great at YouTube is unboxing and unboxing videos. So we have one of the collections, a vinyl collection, right here in front of us. So maybe if we could do a bit of an unboxing here, I think that would be terrific to take a look at what's inside.
Yeah,
Sure.
I think
It's your baby, Tom.
Well, it's Tom's box.
It's
right?
got a lot of,
Yeah, all right, Tom.
this has a lot of parents. I'm just one, so.
Yeah.
Red,
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
ready?
Take the water off the table.
There we go.
So here you
where's our
go.
orchestra?
So we start off brand new quote from John Williams. John Williams' signature. And so we can start
Better get the order right.
episode 1, episode 2, episode 3. So now here's episode 4. Now let's take a look, because there are extra goodies in here. One of which is this poster, which was part of the original package. Ooh. Ah, well.
We'll edit that sound.
Okay, good. Okay, well, this one goes in the defective bin. Okay. Let's see, what else? We have these lovely images here. Yeah, I know about the T-shirt. Coming right up.
I know, you
I think
can
it's
get a
in here.
T-shirt.
Oh, well, here's, this
Yeah.
is, now this is, we were talking about this. This is really neat because it's got the roster of the orchestra, so all the musicians who played on this episode, they're all listed here. Oh, I'm sorry, they're all listed here.
And here, and here.
And it's a blow by blow. Maybe the T-shirt's in the other one. Or maybe we left it at, well, anyway. Oh, no, here it is. Okay, so this was also from the original package, so you could send away and get a Star Wars T-shirt. Sorry to say that offer has expired.
Aw.
Yes. Oh, and I didn't
really?
say, yeah, these all have
Bummed.
very nice center folds too. Gate folds. Here you go. There's some alternate covers here. And yeah, so back to sequence here. And then episode 5 had this really cool booklet stitched into the, wait, no, we're over there, right? Okay, so yeah, you got your scary Imperial walkers there. You got all this jazz here. Nice, Billy D. Williams. Okay, Luke, I am your father. Okay, and then all this stuff, and episode 6, which is only one LP. That's the way it was released. So that's all we got.
That's fantastic.
Pretty nice, huh?
Great. All right. Well, join me in thanking our guests for coming. Tricia, Dan, Tom, Shawn, thank you so much. Thank you.